We have a corporate VPN, Ambit client. It's the first fully CNSA 2.0. That means we followed the most rigorous standard for ensuring post-quantum. We are not using elliptic curve. We're not using Diffie-Hellman key exchange. It's an ML-KEM 1024 static key, actually good VPN.
PQC is rapidly moving from the realm of NIST standards to running in production. One major component on the migration plan for companies is VPN. We look at a corporate VPN client running pure ML-KEM today and the technical and philosophical reasons why the developers chose to skip offering a hybrid option in this episode of the Post-Quantum World. I'm your host, Konstantinos Karagiannis. I lead quantum computing services at Protiviti, where we're helping companies prepare for the benefits and threats of this exploding field. I hope you'll join each episode as we explore the technology and business impacts of this post-quantum era. Our guests today are the co-founders of American Binary. We have the CEO, Kane, and the CTO, Andrew McElroy. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having us on your show. What an honor.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff because you have something real world. I love real world. It can't all be theory. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that you have a PQC corporate VPN, a real client that's in production, that exists, that you can run on machines. So that's pretty exciting. Can you walk us through a little bit about the core features? It's called Ambit client. And maybe you can just give us an overview of how it works.
I get to not talk. Andrew, your turn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we have, well, this is audio. So yeah, I'll walk through it. So we have a corporate VPN, Ambit client, and see what's the most, first off, it's fully CNSA 2.0. And so, what does that mean? That means we followed the most rigorous standard for ensuring post-quantum. It's pure post-quantum. There's no hybrid. We are not using elliptic curve. We're not using Diffie-Hellman key exchange. It's an ML-KEM 1024, static key, actually good VPN. We forked a protocol that starts with W. I'll just leave it at that. And made it actually really good. It's very similar performance. Actually, beats a number of competitor VPNs, even consumer. Even though we don't try to really compare ourselves to consumer, we compare ourselves to enterprise VPNs. And it couldn't be simpler. It's a one button push connect. We can get much deeper into it, but there it is at a high level.
Awesome. And Kevin wants to add something, I believe.
So yes, by CNSA 2.0, we mean that it survives a quantum computer, whereas an alternative method that would have mixed in elliptic curves do not survive quantum computers, so they are not post-quantum. So the only way something can be post-quantum is if the data that is encrypted cannot be decrypted with a quantum computer. So it's a binary thing. There is no sliding scale of sort of surviving, transitionally surviving. It just does or it does not. And we followed that binary definition that the NSA shares. And we realized that anyone can do this. Any company can do it the way we did if they just put in the labor and the time.
Great. And we're going to dig into some of that later and why you hate hybrid. So I'm saving that for a little bit. I know Kevin and I know what he's going to say, but we're going to save it for a little later.
There's more to be said on that.
Yeah. So first I want to dig into what Andrew said about the ML-KEM 1024. So that is the highest level of ML-KEM right now. It is what's called level 5. And you've implemented it in something, I don't know if the name's going to change or not, but into something called MaxKyber.
Yes, that's our protocol name.
Yeah, because Kyber was what it used to be called, right? So we had Kyber, Crystal Kyber, and then now it's called ML-KEM. So you're going to keep the Max Kyber name? I was curious about that.
Yeah, because Max Kyber sounds like a name.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Max MLM is like, what is that?
Yeah. I'm Max Kyber. Nice to meet you.
Right. Bond, James Bond, Kyber, Max Kyber. It works.
So let's talk about Max Kyber, how it was built, and how it enables integration into various network protocols, TLS, IPsec, et cetera.
So if you can accomplish it from a network perspective with, I'm going to have to come out and say that the network, the protocol name, WireGuard. Okay, there. Mm-hmm. Only time I'm mentioning that protocol name. Then you can accomplish it with us. It's not compatible with that other protocol. It has the same performance characteristics. It has the same things that people love about that former protocol, with radically better encryption. We're not. I'll just leave it at that. For now, we can dig more into it. And go ahead, Kevin.
Better can be defined also very clearly, red lines drawn. It's not a subjective perspective. It is what survives a quantum computer, what does not. Survives is better, not survives is not better.
Right. And beyond that, we can also show a number of actual, so not only does it have to survive a quantum computer, we can't backtrack and have it fail in the myriad of ways that, classical security, right? You can't have side channels. You can't have timing attacks. You can't have a classical computer, or even, a data center full of FPGAs or some other exotic, bit of hardware, GPUs, whatever. It needs to survive even all of that. It needs to survive any compute paradigm you throw at this, whether it's future DNA computing or some other weird analog system, or whatever. There should be no paradigm of compute, no complexity classes that are that are known currently that can give advantage on the cryptography used. And as far as the world knows, and there is multiple decades of international research on this, the cryptography that is used in this VPN is best of class. Okay.
So what challenges were there then in implementing the new NIST PQC inside of here?
So right off the bat, let's talk about an ML-KEM public key size, 1568 bytes. Okay, that's an interesting number. Networks are often have an MTU of 1500. Android defaults to 1420. The theoretical legal minimum on IPv6 is, what is it, 1280. So the first number that I told you is bigger than the other numbers. This can lead to packet fragmentation. Mm-hmm. There are scenarios where you cannot fragment on the network, or your packets will drop. Cough, cough, a carrier that starts with T and ends in mobile. It just will not work. And this is not to say that carrier is bad. Actually, quite the opposite. I think they have some of the best engineering because they're actually following RFC standards. When you do what's called a 6-to-4 XLAT, right? When you have an IPv4 NAT and you go to an IPv6 and then you translate back to IPv4, if you allow if you're expecting the network to fragment your packets, it's not going to. It's going to drop them. And so you have to stay under. And so what you will find is in other efforts to create a post-quantum key exchange, like right now, like in Google Chrome, I think there is now an X25519 Kyber 768. Okay, that's not 1024. They stayed under that 1500 MTU for all the reasons I just explained. Mm-hmm. But again, and this is also the second problem with hybrid, two problems. In the best case scenario, I'm going to oversimplify and call it double encrypt. And they'll say, no, I'm not really double encrypt, but we'll just, for oversimplification purposes, we'll call it double encrypt for right now. In the best case scenario, the hybrid, the elliptic curve side is effectively a no-op on the full construction, and you are able to rely on the PQC side. But other than us, there is nobody that I've seen so far that is doing a ML-KEM 1024 construction, because you don't have any room, A, for that in the first place without some things we were able to accomplish. But B, you have to make room also then for the elliptic curve side. And so now you're really kind of forced to deal with, ML-KEM 768. So we're able to not, take on that additional payload of the hybrid side and just give you the best, as you mentioned earlier, NIST level 5 security, rather than compromising on that. And that's the best case scenario. So there's a website, I would have people check out, mega-arai.io. It's been around for a while, and it was and this has nothing to do with post quantum, but this does have to do with what happens when you try to mix different crypto systems and you're not extremely super careful with your constructions. Go check that out as offline reading. There was a time period when Mega Cloud was readable and writable by literally everybody. It was just publicly writable to anybody because they got this mixing of crypto systems wrong. This is also NSA's biggest objection to hybrid, is the added complexity you have from hybrid. Furthermore, the best argument that I've heard for why hybrid is, well, what happens if ML-KEM turns out to have a problem and we have to fall back on the security of the elliptic curve side? Okay, that's a terrifying prospect, because we already know the hybrid, the elliptic curve side is or RSA even, different crypto, same problem. You're in trouble in the long run anyway. A, B, you did not solve the harvest attack problem, and then C, we're either trusting ML-KEM and its possible fallback, which we can get into on that soon, or not. So go ahead, Kevin. I know you're wanting to say something.
Yeah, I think it's time to fully shift into this.
The argument of fallback, man, I wish we were in a collegiate debate in a university without business consequences or without concern about how it reflects our employees or investors, because I would torment that person till they walk off the stage crying. That's just, the argument is so devoid of cognitive faculty that I'm just surprised it gets to exist. It's like saying if the Titanic is sinking, but the skiffs might not be perfect, we want to go back to that Titanic and drown. So let's be clear. Elliptic curves is drowning. They don't survive. It's a useless algorithm in the face of an advanced computer that can factor far more efficiently than what we know to be possible on this day, unclassified today, right? And we know that the Chinese government is about spending the most, at least in public disclosure of spending, on this particular problem set, actually. One of their areas of focus exclusively, narrowly, with advanced computing or quantum computing. I don't like using the word quantum computing because then you have these other people who are naysayers and they say, well, they're 20 years away. Yeah, well, you know what? Shale and horizontal drilling were also 10 years away for 50 years until one day where they were just here. And as a result of that, the global economy gets to go forward because now we have increased capacity of hydrocarbons as a result of that innovation that was supposed to be here forever. One day it just showed up. By the way, without shale, prices would be through the roof and the global economy would be at a halt. So one innovation saved us all. And one innovation will spin it the other way. And it's coming because you can see publications every week. You can see companies making breakthroughs every week. And it's sort of hard for people to fathom innovation at that rate. And they're like, well, 30 years ago, people were working on this problem. 30 years ago, the whole world's the research of all the world wasn't indexed on a search engine. So now you can synthesize all of that. By the way, AI tools will make it easier to synthesize that. This is coming. It's inevitable. And that's why the NSA is in a move. And the hybrid people are just sort of slowing us down in a way because it's not a solution. It doesn't solve any problems. And the whole argument that, well, we get to experiment with it. That's ridiculous. That's like saying I'm experimenting with learning to swim by putting my feet in the shallow end. You have to get in the water.
Okay, so and I promised everybody listening that Kevin has strong opinions on this, right? So, so if I'm hearing this clearly, Andrew, some of your complaints with hybrid are it does cause certain technical issues, right? In terms of size and all that. Like, so you're not happy with the level 3 implementation of Kyber being used in a hybrid solution.
It's the best you can do.
Yeah, because level 3 is the best you do. So that limits you to actually 3 dimensions of on your matrix of polynomials, and whereas level 5 gives you 4 dimensions. So that is kind of an infinitely larger. It's just much bigger, and harder to solve. Let's say the closest vector problem and learning with errors and everything. So it is, I guess, theoretically way more secure, which is great. Kevin's problem, though, is also that you're dragging along this terrible, old, outdated, not safe thing along for the ride. Can you ever, though, for listeners, can you ever get to that chewy center, that vulnerable center, if you do hybrid correctly?
No, because it doesn't survive a quantum computer, so there's nothing you can do to make it work.
Well, what I mean is for listeners, when they hear hybrid, they're thinking that there's, you're using, let's say, elliptic curve, and you're giving it the post-quantum like wrap, right? So how is that failing? Like, which point in that process is failing and making it vulnerable to attack? Just so listeners could kind of understand why hybrid would be the way. Yeah.
So I have to kind of outline too, and I'm really trying to be, as fair as possible on this, because I think it's intellectually the right thing to do. Because also the fact that hybrid is ultimately not a great answer, but let's at least be as intellectually honest about it as possible. So, okay. In the best case scenario, all you've done is limit the security level on the post-quantum side. Because we've already talked about MTU, right?
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we really have to be mindful of MTU. Now, this is, of course, for data in transit, data at rest. That's a separate discussion. And we can also talk about, data in process, but that's usually the and I really don't want to get into this too much, but that's more typically homomorphic, domain. But I have a minor beef with homomorphic to talk about later if we get into that. The short answer on that is there is no homomorphic scheme that achieves what is called INDCCA2. We can talk about that later. Just based on how, just mathematical QED, basis, that's, you can't get there. That's the other thing. ML-KEM does give you not just the NIST level 5 security, but it gives you the best possible foot forward on being able on defending against an adversary attempting to attack the encryption itself. I'm not entirely clear how what the exact audience is, how deep we necessarily go, but we can deep dive into why INDCCA2 matters if that is something that is relevant to this audience, or we can pull back and keep
not
it
go
more
too
executive
deep.
level.
I just want to give them an idea of why having both is bad. Besides the lowering to 7.
And let me throw this also out there. So who's to say that a side channel isn't discovered on the elliptic curve side? I mean, it could happen. Maybe this is an implementation problem, not a algorithm level problem. But to say that OpenSSL has never had any vulnerabilities ever, it would be massively incorrect. I mean, issues are discovered all the time and patched. So go ahead, Kevin.
Isn't there a sweet spot for the cycle of cryptography, Andrew, where if it's too new, you may not have discovered the vulnerability, but where if it's really old, then it's been ample time for everyone to discover a vulnerability. And then naturally, if it's a state actor, never disclose it because they're going to exploit it continuously.
So I was with you until that last part, because what you're describing is something that's called no bus, nobody but us. That model, that I don't know the best way to articulate that, but no bus has been proven over and over again to not work, because you're not, a given person is not the only smart person in the world. There are other smart people that will figure out the same things eventually. But to your first point, that's the other, I'll call it, strongest argument that we hear for hybrid. Is that a compelling argument? That's really for the listener to decide.
You know what I never hear said? We've been given our deprecation timeline, right? We know that 2030 is deprecation, 2035 is disallow for the vulnerable ciphers. You never hear anyone use that in the same breath as hybrid. You never hear anyone say, and that means technically your hybrid solution in 2035 will contain something that's disallowed.
Yes.
Like, you never hear that. It's completely...
2026 is the number to actually circle on the calendar, because that is when you will start to see elliptic curves begin to be dropped from FIPS 140. -3 in this case. Yeah. So yes, so you can have compliant cryptography today. And this is actually important to anybody who cares about any security frameworks from SOC 2, Type 2 on down. You can have compliant cryptography today. In a few years, that cryptography may not still be compliant. So this is also another reason, even if you don't care about harvest tech, even if you don't care about any of the other issues, and you just care about your boring, run of the day, like, how do I stay compliant? Because maybe you're in an industry where you have to have certain compliances. This is still a conversation that still needs your attention. Go ahead, Kevin.
Can I back up slightly? I sort of find it a little surprising if it seems sort of like we're the frog, or not the frog, was a different Eastern. We're coming to a slow boil, and we haven't really recognized it. Yeah. And so we all can acknowledge it abstractly, but it doesn't seem like our actions reflect that abstract acknowledgement. And here's what I mean by that. One instance of this used in the wild could result in a sell-off in the markets if people interpret it correctly, meaning that they understand what it means. So it is the end if it's used. In finance, I used to be a fund manager. A risk is sort of where you spend all your energy once you're making money. So the United States is on a good run. We're doing well. Now we need to direct all of our attention towards risk. This isn't a risk. It's a real risk. It's recognized by the NSA, White House, G7, South Korea, Singapore. It's in all the quantum conferences. It's in Forbes. So then things that don't matter are cost. Things that don't matter are how much hard we have to work. These are things that I don't want to hear from people are factors to consider on the transition. You don't have to ever work with our company or do anything, but as a person who is sort of obsessive about what is and what is not just as a personality, I don't want to hear it.
Well, there's a lot of passionate folks in cryptography. I'll say.
True.
So it sounds like Kevin really wants to protect your data with Ambit client.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to, it's sort of funny, but we joke, like, even if we make it successful and we sort of have decent sized bank accounts one day, it has to be worth something, or the money is not worth anything. And I can tell you, this is at the center of the worthness of money, is the encryption that moves it over the internet.
Yes, absolutely. You can view it from the regulatory requirements everyone's going to be faced with, or this fact that some quantum advancement could go just a little faster than we thought it would, and put sensitive information at risk a little sooner than we thought it would.
Yeah. And to that point, we also can't discount dequantization. So the idea that you start off with a quantum algorithm, we learn something interesting because we've already seen this before, and then classical computers, we learned some new tricks with classical computers that were, that got pulled inspiration from the quantum computer. And now we have a neat little, algorithm that can be ran classically that we didn't expect to have before. And this term is called dequantization of algorithms, and it's a thing. So yes, the risk is the cryptographically relevant quantum computer, but what we will learn about classical computation along the journey to achieving this fault tolerant large scale quantum computer, are things that we don't currently know, and that should not be discounted.
Well, when we talk about this idea of things coming quicker than we thought, maybe, like right now there's Project 11 has a new Q-Day prize. I don't know if you heard about this. They're offering a Bitcoin to anyone who can break elliptic curve using a quantum computer. And they were nice and kept it small. It's not like you have to break ECC in use.
But hang on for a second. If you can break it, then just get the Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, that's no the point. No. I get what you're saying, but the point is they made it easier problem. It's not like full bit. Strength.
But that would also be better. Okay, not advocating that anyone do that, but that would be one way to demonstrate that you've certainly met the bar.
Sure, yeah, but they're being kind, and you don't have to have a quantum computer of unreasonable size. They're just trying to test people's ability to attack it in a smaller subset with a simpler machine and no shortcuts, no hybrid methods, no anything. So it's kind of an interesting idea to see if we can extrapolate any progress along the way. Will someone reveal some technique that's worthwhile? I don't think if someone thought that they can go all the way up and hack Bitcoin with this, I don't believe they're going to reveal it for one Bitcoin. But if someone genuinely is on the right path, and isn't quite there, who knows? It's possible, depending on the value of that Bitcoin over the next few, weeks, months. Let's talk just a little bit about how realistic it is to set this up. So you mentioned that you're not getting any kind of performance hit, right? I know you're using, what's it called? Is it called vector packet processing?
Yes, vector packet processing for the data plane on the servers. Yes.
Yeah. So now you've tested this with ML-KEM. Are there plans to, in the future, add in, let's say, HQC when that's standardized over the next 2 years?
So that's a conversation that we're looking at that possibility. We're not committing to that yet. Mm-hmm. The algorithm that I have my eye on more in its early days is I'm keeping track of AES 250, what's called AES 256 256. So there is actually now an effort to standardize a 256-bit block version of AES. Mm-hmm. This is extremely welcomed and it'll be several years before this gets to the point where it's standardized. But boy, oh boy, I am very happy to see that effort move forward. Because that begins to solve a big, nervousness that I've had with AES 256. When you look at the Grover quantum search algorithm, square root of 2, cut the key in half. Okay, well, now if we are able to have a 256-bit block, that gives you a little bit more, assurance that, okay, AES should actually really definitely hold up. Similarly, I really hope that ASCON fully adopts a post-quantum mode, because we need something critical for embedded in IoT. And AES isn't always the answer. Mm-hmm. For all of its strength, we need a true lightweight cipher. ASCON is, a good choice if they can, make sure to actually have a post-quantum mode, which I have to, I'll have to check to see if that's still in the running, but my understanding is it is.
I'm puzzled by the fact that AES 128 is considered post-quantum. I couldn't disagree more. I just, it's still
Well,
recommended that to use it.
so the thing about AES, and there's very few papers on this. There's like 3 papers, and there's one important paper from IACR this year. So not only do we have to pay attention to AES, 256 versus AES, 128, the modes in my view are actually more important. So GCM, okay, fine. No one seems to have any issues with that. Okay, asterisks. I'm sure the true cryptographer nerds will, have some statements around this. You can get super, in the weeds on this. But some other modes, not all modes are post-quantum safe in terms of really absolutely long-term ensuring that you don't have a problem. There are theoretical attacks in some of the modes. And, as an offline note, I can, throw that paper over. Just something that people should definitely check out if you're technically inclined, to do so. The great paper that I'm trying to remember the name of the paper that came out in 2025. It's very recent. Fantastic bit of work. Really glad that it got published, or at least it's in preprint right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of things to consider. So I was curious about how you imagine growing. And if ML-KEM is working, the performance is good. I don't really see the need for adding anything different, right? I mean, it's not necessary. I was curious.
I mean, it will very likely be an alternate. So what I want to avoid with Max Kyber long term is downgrade attacks and falling into the same trap that TLS ran into, where there's just too many different cipher suites and then having to understand the art of ordering them. We want to also avoid the problems that TLS crypto agility is important, and we do want to maintain crypto agility, but by the same token, we also want to avoid the downsides of what TLS has historically ran into. And that's a conversation. That's a big conversation. It could be its own episode, frankly.
So, if a company wanted to try this out, try out Ambit, how could they do so easily?
Yeah, reach out to us on our website. We would spend at this stage fairly soon. We'll have direct purchase on our website, but at this stage, email us on our contact form. We'll set up a pilot. See how it goes. Should go well. So
they can test the performance and how it scales and how it compares.
Yeah,
that's great. So with that, I'm gonna have all that in the show notes so folks can find it, and we'll see if this can survive Kevin's scrutiny in the future. I don't know. Of course it will.
So the White House, the NSA, CISA, everyone is concerned about the risk evidenced by their memos, policies, mandates. So it's recognized as real and pressing. And so if that's true, let's go forward to 10 years. Let's roll forward 10 years. So it's the year 2035, and there is a hot war around Taiwan or somewhere, and the tool is used in plain sight because it's no longer valuable to use it for clandestine purposes. It's just going to use it like a weapon, like the US did with the atomic bomb. So they use it. And then after the conflict, everything is strange and the markets aren't moving as fast. And everyone's like, well, what could we have done? Well, let's go back 10 years and talk to the person who said it's going to be expensive to transition. Are you telling me that we could have avoided the global economy coming to a crawl for 36 months if we just spent an extra $1 billion? Now, you can say this is a scare tactic and a fear tactic. Hey, I'm just echoing NSA policy in White House, every G7, German, all of them, So it's sort of like we aligned ourselves around a truth, a dark truth, and decided to solve a problem by putting in our blood, sweat, and tears into it. Of course, we make some gain for that, but that's the reward for the risk taken and the opportunity cost of the other things we could be doing with our lives.
Information security is always about protecting against that worst case scenario. So best case scenario, quantum computers aren't powerful enough in 10 years, and we just did it because of regulatory reasons. Worst case, just before that regulatory deadline, oh no, the worst happened. So for whatever reason, it is definitely time to start migrating. So it's great that now people can actually benchmark this in their companies and see how it performs. So guys, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That does it for this episode. Thanks to Kevin Kane and Andrew McElroy for joining to discuss their PQC-enabled VPN. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to Protiviti's The Post-Quantum World and maybe leave a review to help others find us. Be sure to follow me on all socials at Constant Hacker. That's Constant with a K, Hacker. You'll find links there to what we're doing in quantum computing services at Protiviti. You can also DM me questions or suggestions for what you'd like to hear on the show. For more information on our quantum services, check out Protiviti.com or follow Protiviti Tech on X and LinkedIn. Until next time, be kind and stay quantum curious.